You've stated your name. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you do for a living?
I am a criminalist at the Iowa DCI Crime Laboratory, where I am in the firearms and tool marks section of the lab.
You've just had Vic Murillo come out of the stand. You work with Vic Murillo, correct?
That's correct.
How long have you been with the DCI Crime Lab?
I've been at the crime lab since 2006 and the firearms section since 2017.
Okay. Do you do similar job that Mr. Murillo does?
Yes, I do.
So I'm not going to bore the jury by going through all about firearms anymore. I think they understand that pretty well. In this case, were you in charge of doing firearms examination?
Yes, I was.
When did you get involved in this case?
I got involved 2024, May-ish of 2024.
Okay. When you got involved, were you, Mr. Murillo has testified that he was in the process of trying to find the particular firearm that had been used to kill Ryan Cooper.
Yes.
Was that part of your task to take over and try to determine which firearm had been used to kill Mr. Cooper?
Yes, it was.
Okay. As part of that, did you then examine certain firearms?
I did.
Can you tell us what firearms you examined?
In the first examination, I examined 5 long guns and 1 handgun. In the second examination that I performed, I examined another rifle or long gun.
Okay. Do you have a copy of your report with you?
I have a copy of the second report, but not the first report.
Okay. Would giving you a copy of your reports help refresh your memory on what you would have examined?
Yes, it would.
Permission to approach?
You may, and you don't need to ask again with this witness.
You have a chance to look at your reports and see what you examined.
Yes, I have.
Okay. What were the first items that you examined?
So like we talked about in the report, I've noted here that there was a pistol, a .22 pistol, and then 5 .22 long guns or rifles. And those were examined in the laboratory. I test-fired them, and then I compared them to a submitted cartridge case. And the conclusions of that cartridge case are also in that report.
Okay. Now, beginning with that, there was a cartridge case that's now been admitted as State 294. Was that the cartridge case that had been found at the residence where Ryan Cooper was killed?
So in my report, it's lab item number 6, and yes, there was a cartridge case that was submitted for examination.
And as you say, lab item number 6, when the cases come to you, they get a different number. Back at the residence, it was like a placard 5. When it comes over to the lab, you give it a different number to identify it, so it became a 6.
Yes.
And in this courtroom now, we've also given it a number as 294.
Sure.
Okay. Now, when you talked about examining these and ruling out this firearm that as the firearm that fired that cartridge case, correct?
That's correct, in this first report of mine.
Okay. Did you examine other firearms as part of this investigation?
Yes, I did. An additional firearm was submitted, and there was another report that I issued to the comparisons.
Can you tell us the date and what was submitted?
Yes, so on May 31st, my report was issued on May 31st, submitted to the laboratory on May 7th, 2024. There was some items of evidence, including a rifle and the original cartridge case. Additional cartridge cases were also submitted a little bit later, but the findings of that would be in my report, item 13, or report 13, that comparison was done.
Okay. And when you did the comparison, what was your findings?
The microscopic comparisons conducted on the cartridge case from the scene, they were compared to the rifle submitted in report number 13, and the cartridge case was identified as having been fired in that rifle. In my case, that lab item number 49, it was a Ruger 1022 rifle.
Okay. When did you receive this Ruger 1022 rifle?
It was received on May 7th, 2024.
Okay. And what kind of testing did you do with this rifle?
So the rifle was brought back to my laboratory where I took notes. I examined the rifle, confirmed that it was in working order, and then once I did confirm working order, I confirmed the serial number. I went ahead and test fired that rifle. I collected the known cartridge cases and known bullets from that rifle because I was able to collect those from our laboratory, knowing those came from the rifle. Now I can use them as known samples. And then once I had those known samples, I was able to use those on the microscope, the comparison microscope, which I'm assuming you guys might have talked about already, where we're comparing test-fired cartridge cases to the unknown cartridge case, and that's where the conclusion was made.
What conclusion did you make?
Again, that that cartridge case was fired from that firearm.
Okay, so to be clear with the jury, you finally were able to determine that what had been at the resident as placard 5 came to the lab and became number 6, and now was 294, was fired from that gun.
That's correct.
Will you tell the jury what 298 is?
So this is a Ruger 1022, model 1022, 22 long rifle, long gun or rifle, and the serial number on this particular firearm is 0003-61269. So this is the rifle that I examined and test fired in my laboratory.
And is this the same rifle that you identified as the one that had fired those bullets and left a casing that was found and the bullets that had killed Mr. Cooper?
This rifle was compared to the cartridge case, yes.
Okay. And you determined that it's the same that had done that?
Yes.
Okay. You talked about the comparison. Can you just tell the jury in terms of the science and if it might aid you to show you your pictures on what you use to, how you do the comparison?
So we talked a little bit about the comparison microscope. So in the case of examination of the test-fired cartridge cases, we use a comparison microscope in which we have 2 stages. We're able to use one eyepiece, and we can examine the cartridge cases across that one eyepiece. So on the left stage, I have the test-fired cartridge cases from this particular rifle. On the right, I have the cartridge case from the scene. I use that singular the set of eyepieces. I'm able to compare the markings that are left by this firearm on the test-fired cartridge case to the markings that are on the sample from the scene, and take photographs, and then conclude that that cartridge case had been fired from this particular firearm.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for the purposes of identification as State Exhibit 276 through 285. Do you recognize what I've handed you as 276 through 285?
I do, yes.
Those pictures that you took as part of your testing for this firearm to determine if it was the exact firearm that had been used to fire those bullets that killed Mr. Cooper?
This is a combination of photos of my first report and my second report, including the comparison photos that I took.
Okay. They're fair and accurate of what you did as part of your analysis?
Yes.
We move to publish 276 through 285.
Do you want to offer them first?
Oh, we move to admit them into evidence.
Mr. Hawbaker, any objection?
We have no objection.
All right. Then 276 through 285 are admitted, and we can now publish them. Okay.
Are you able to see that clearly, Ms. Hart?
I am.
Okay. Can you tell us what we see on what's been admitted as 276?
Yes, I can. So to start, what you're looking at here is what I would see through my comparison microscope. So I'm using a set of eyepieces, as I talked about, and on the left you have an image, and on the right we have an image. So I have two stages, I have two spots to put two different cartridge cases. In this particular photo, we're referring to report 11. So we see my lab item 38 down the bottom left-hand corner. That's the test fires from the item 38, or the rifle, that was submitted. And that on the right side is the cartridge case that was collected from the scene. In this particular photo, you're definitely seeing that there is a difference in the firing pin strike, which is at the 3 o'clock position on that cartridge case. On the left, we have a very narrow rectangular strike. On the right, we have a more typical square rectangle shape firing pin impression. So that's just showing what two different firing pins will look like. This is an exclusion. These are two different class characteristics. So we're seeing two different shaped firing pins. And so that's referring to that report 11 where that firearm was eliminated as having fired that cartridge case on the right-hand side.
Okay. So here you're doing the elimination. This is not the one. You're saying, nope, this is not it.
Correct.
Okay. And that's how part of the science works, is you can do that microscopic comparison.
That is correct.
What do we see on 277?
So again, on the left side, we have a different test fire from a different rifle, again from that report number 11. Item 39 is actually another rifle. So you're seeing, again, that rectangular shaped firing pin. However, you can tell there's a different shape. That firing pin's a completely different shape from the firing pin impression on the right-hand side, again, at that 3 o'clock position. So again, it's a class characteristic that's different, and therefore there's an elimination.
Move to 278.
Again, another test-fired cartridge case on the left, and this is a very distinct, different marking left behind by that firearm. On the left-hand side, that firing pin and that cartridge is moving around in that chamber. So you see some shearing there on the left. That's what that big kind of oval-shaped reflective area is. Versus the evidence on the right-hand side. So again, this is another elimination.
And that elimination is every firearm kind of leaves a fingerprint, so you can tell which prints were taken, if I use normal layman's understanding of fingerprints.
Yes. Okay.
What do we see on 279?
So now this is a picture of item 49, and this is found in report 13. This is the Ruger 1022 rifle that I just showed you a little bit ago. The firing pin impression on the left from the test-fired cartridge case from that rifle has very similar characteristics from this view. Now this is a blown-out view. This is a zoomed-out, distant view, an overall picture of that cartridge case, and so you can start to see, if I refer you to the top 12 o'clock, actually 11 o'clock position, we've got the ejector, we've got a mark in that top left top left corner, and then you work your way around to the 3 o'clock position, and that firing pin shape and the marks that are in that firing pin are consistent with each other. And from this position here, this overall just gives you a general view. I'll take additional photographs of that breech face marks, of the ejector marks, of the firing pin impression. So that's what you're going to see in the subsequent photos.
I'm going to hand you a pointer so that you can just clarify what you say in the jury. So that you can what is correct.
Thank you. So I was referring to that 11 o'clock position, these marks here and here, and then that firing pin impression here at the 3 o'clock position. And then there's also some breech face marks, but again, we'll look at those in closer magnification. So this would be the firearm that I identified the cartridge case as having been fired from.
What do we see on State Exhibit 280?
So this is actually kind of turning the cartridge case around on my scope. So instead of the previous photo, which we're looking at the head stamp area of that cartridge case, now we've turned it on its side and we're looking at the chamber marks from the inside of that chamber of that firearm. So again, these are stria, these scratches that go across. This black line is the line of demarcation. So on the left is the left stage of my microscope over here, and the right side of that line is the right stage. So I've got that cartridge case turned horizontally, and I can see these marks that are left from the inside of the chamber. And so you can start at the top and you kind of work your way down, and you can see how these lines here align across that line of demarcation. It's just another mark, another spot within that chamber that helps to identify that cartridge case as having been fired from that firearm.
What do we see on 281?
So this is a cast. So when we are dealing with cartridge cases, we use some casting material. It's kind of like an epoxy. It mixes together, and we're able to apply that to the head stamp. We can pull that casting material off, and it's going to give us a mirror image, if you will, kind of like silly putty. When you pull silly putty off of a newspaper, you'd have that silly putty would leave the newspaper on its surface, and you can read it backwards. That's the same thing that's happening here with that casting material. So now we're able to see what's down, and this is the firing pin impression. So now we're able to see what's at the bottom of that firing pin impression. And again, across, test fire on the left, evidence on the right, and you can start to see these marks here, these impression marks here, and there's some marks down here that we're looking at, come around here. Those are the marks that I used to identify, again, that this cartridge case was fired in this particular rifle.
What do we see on 282?
This, if you remember from that overall picture at that 11 o'clock position, this is the ejector mark that we have on the breech face. And again, shape, we've got the shape and then the small little impressions here. These are what we refer to as, again, individual characteristics, and they line up across both sides of that that screen, indicating again that identification.
Again, indicating that this is the firearm that fired that casing that was found inside that living room in Trail.
That's correct.
What do we see on 283?
This is just one additional mark, an extractor mark that was found on the breech face or the head stamp area of that cartridge case. Again, just these are photos that are taking pictures of the individual characteristics that I am seeing in regards to supporting my conclusion.
Again, same conclusion, that it's the same firearm.
That's correct.
What do we see on 284?
One more mark that we're seeing on that head stamp from the breech face of that firearm. We're just seeing some marks here that align that I saw on both sides, again, of that firearm and the test fire.
And on 285?
Just a different view of that.
Okay. So your conclusion within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty is that's the same firearm that was used to kill Mr. Cooper?
To the cartridge case that was found at the scene.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Judge, you can take it down. When you examined this firearm, the Ruger, did you find it to have a muffler?
No. Did
What
not
is
have
a-
a suppressor.
Yeah, what is that? Can you explain that to the jury?
A suppressor just acts to suppress the sound of the shot being fired.
There's no suppressor on this firearm.
That's correct.
The bullets that were found or retrieved from the body or the head of Mr. Cooper, were you at some point, did you have a chance to try to make a comparison of those bullets as to whether they came from this firearm?
Yes, I did.
And what was your findings in that regard?
In this particular instance, the bullets were in poor condition. The rifling information that was located on the bullets compared to the bullets that I captured from the rifle, so the test-fired bullets, unfortunately I did not have enough individual characteristics to make a conclusion in regards to an identification or an elimination. In this particular case, it was an inconclusive result. It had similar rifling characteristics, so the shape and the size and the number of lands and grooves that were present did align between the unknown bullets and the test-fired bullets. However, there wasn't enough information to go any further than that.
And when you say poor condition, what do you mean? Is that they were damaged and you're unable to use them because of the damage they didn't cut?
They were damaged. The 22 bullets are lead bullets, so they're very soft, so they tend to, one, damage easy, and two, they don't usually have great individual characteristics that are captured from the rifling information inside that barrel. And so in this case, they just lacked the individual characteristics, those small marks, to make any type of conclusion.
And when you talk of the damage, like I said, they were retrieved and have been admitted as 296. 296. They were damaged. Will the damage be when they pierce through skin and meet bone on the face of Mr. Cooper that could cause the kind of damage that you're talking about?
Yes, it could.
Talk of this firearm. When this firearm is fired, as you said, you didn't find it having a muffler when you tested it. What kind of sound, will it make a loud sound when this firearm is fired, especially in a small, closed quarters of a house?
Yes, it would.
Now, did you find this firearm to be in good working condition?
Yes, it worked properly for me in test firing it.
And when you say that, can you just explain what that means?
Again, we go through the firearm, we take notes, we make sure it's in functioning order. It did not malfunction in any way. When I pulled the trigger to the rear, it functioned as I would expect a rifle to function. When I test fired it, I didn't have any issues with misfires or anything like that.
Okay. Now, again, it sounds like a silly question, but to use this firearm, you would have to hold it.
That's correct.
It has a trigger function.
It does.
Can you tell the jury what that is and how that applies, how you fire this firearm?
Sure. The trigger must be depressed to the rear to release the firing pin. So that the trigger has to be depressed with each round fired as a semi-automatic. So with each pull of the trigger, a round is fired.
So when you say that, when this firearm, we've had evidence that Mr. Cooper was shot twice on his face. For that to happen, will someone have had to pull the trigger on two separate occasions?
Yes.
And this firearm will not just go off by itself. Someone would have had to hold it, point it, pull the trigger 2 times for it to make those 2 shots on Mr. Cooper's face.
The trigger has to be depressed to the rear. As for holding, it could be sitting on a table and the trigger could be depressed to the rear. So, but the trigger has to be pulled to the rear.
And just to clarify that, the firearm won't go off by itself. It just won't do that from what you tested and found it to be in good working condition.
Correct.
I have no further question for this witness at this time. Thank you.
Any cross-examination, Mr. Hotbaker?
None from us, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. You may step down.